Have you ever been forced to choose between your job and your self-respect? What would you do if your boss looked you in the eye and said, "do as I said," or "quit"? Today's story is about a single father who faced that exact moment. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, he wasn't connected, but he had one thing no one could take away: his dignity. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like if you enjoy powerful life stories. Your support helps us bring you more unforgettable stories every week. Now, let's begin. It was 7:15 on a cold Monday morning when Daniel Parker walked into the towering glass headquarters of Harrison Global Technologies. With one hand, he carried a worn leather briefcase. In the other, he held a small lunch bag his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, had decorated with colorful stickers that read, "Best Dad Ever." Daniel smiled every time he looked at it. Life hadn't been easy since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Every morning began before sunrise. He made breakfast, packed Lily's school lunch, braided her hair the best he could, dropped her off at school, and then rushed to work. Despite the endless responsibilities, Daniel was never late. He had worked for Harrison Global for 11 years. Everyone in the office respected him. He solved impossible problems, stayed late when projects were behind schedule, and never took credit for anyone else's work. But there was one person who never seemed to notice: CEO Richard Harrison. Richard believed fear created loyalty. He demanded perfection and expected absolute obedience from every employee. To him, people weren't human beings. They were replaceable numbers. That Monday morning, the atmosphere in the office felt different. Employees whispered nervously, "The CEO is in a terrible mood. I heard the investors rejected the proposal. Someone's getting fired today." Daniel ignored the rumors. He simply sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and quietly began reviewing the presentation that had taken him weeks to prepare. At exactly 9 a.m., an email flashed across every employee's screen. "Emergency boardroom meeting. Attendance mandatory. **. Inside the massive conference room, nearly 50 employees sat in complete silence. Richard Harrison entered without greeting anyone. His expensive Italian suit, polished shoes, and cold expression made the room feel even smaller. Without saying a word, he slammed a thick folder onto the conference table. "This," he barked, "is unacceptable." No one dared speak. The investors hated the proposal. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Daniel. "You prepared this presentation, didn't you?" Daniel calmly stood. "Yes, sir. But the investors requested changes only yesterday. We weren't given enough time to." Richard cut him off. "I don't want excuses." The room fell silent. Daniel took a slow breath. "Sir, my team worked through the weekend. We completed everything that was realistically possible." Richard stepped closer. "I don't care how hard you worked." His voice echoed through the room. "I care about results." Daniel looked around. His coworkers lowered their heads. No one wanted to become the next target. Then Richard leaned forward and pointed directly at Daniel. "Do as I said." He paused. "Or quit." For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Every employee expected Daniel to apologize, to beg, to surrender. Instead, Daniel quietly closed his notebook. He removed his employee badge, placed it gently on the conference table, looked the CEO straight in the eyes, and smiled. "I choose my dignity." Without another word, he turned around and walked out of the boardroom. No one moved, no one spoke, but every single person knew. The conference room remained frozen long after Daniel walked out. No one dared to breathe. The sound of the closing door echoed through the room like thunder. CEO Richard Harrison straightened his tie and forced a smug smile. "Get back to work," he snapped. "Anyone who thinks they're bigger than this company can leave with him." One by one, the employees stood up and quietly returned to their desks. But something had changed. For the first time, they weren't afraid for Daniel. They were afraid for the company. Meanwhile, Daniel walked calmly through the office. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shaking. He simply felt free. At his desk, he opened the bottom drawer and carefully placed family photos into a small cardboard box. The first picture showed Lily on her first day of school, smiling with 2 missing front teeth. The second was the last family photo taken before his wife, Emily, lost her battle with cancer. Daniel paused for a moment. He gently ran his fingers across the picture. "I hope I made the right choice," he whispered. Just then, his closest friend at work, Michael, rushed over. "Daniel, don't do this," Michael pleaded. "Go back and apologize. Richard will calm down." Daniel smiled softly. "If I apologize today," he said, "I'll spend the rest of my life apologizing for things that aren't my fault." Michael lowered his head. Deep inside, he knew Daniel was right. As Daniel carried the box toward the elevator, employees quietly stepped aside. Some nodded with respect. Others whispered, "Good luck." A few even wiped tears from their eyes. When the elevator doors closed, Daniel looked at his reflection. For the first time in years, he didn't see an exhausted employee. He saw a father who had chosen self-respect over fear. That evening, Daniel picked Lily up from school. She noticed the cardboard box sitting in the back seat. "Daddy, did you clean your office?" Daniel smiled. "Something like that. Are you on vacation?" He laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. I quit my job." Lily looked out the window for a few seconds. Then she asked the question every parent fears. "Are we going to lose our home?" Daniel felt his heart sink. He reached over and held her little hand. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I promise you one thing. I will never let anyone treat me without respect." Lily smiled. "My teacher says brave people are scared too. They just do the right thing anyway." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes, the greatest life lessons come from children. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table. He opened his laptop and stared at his bank account. There wasn't much savings left, only enough to cover a few months of expenses. Bills were waiting. The mortgage payment was due next week. School fees would arrive soon. For a brief moment, fear crept into his mind. Did I make a terrible mistake? But before doubt could take over, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Hello? Is this Daniel Parker?" "Yes. My name is Sarah Collins. I'm the executive director at Nova Tech Industries." Daniel frowned. "I've heard of your company." Sarah smiled. "I'm sure you have. Actually, we've been watching your work for almost 2 years." Daniel was speechless. "We know the presentation that impressed investors last year was your idea. We know the software upgrade that saved Harrison Global millions was your design. And today," she paused, "we saw what happened." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The meeting was recorded. A board member shared the video with several industry leaders. Sarah continued, "You stood up for yourself without shouting. You stayed calm under pressure. That's exactly the kind of leader we're looking for." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening." Sarah smiled again. "I'd like to invite you to breakfast tomorrow morning. Not for a job interview. For a conversation." Daniel was confused. What kind of conversation? The kind that could change your life. After hanging up, Daniel sat silently in the dark. Less than 12 hours earlier, he thought he had lost everything. Now, a door he never expected had quietly begun to open. But Daniel had no idea. The biggest surprise was still waiting for him. Back at Harrison Global, CEO Richard Harrison walked into his office expecting another ordinary evening. Instead, he found every member of the board of directors waiting inside. None of them looked happy. One of the directors slowly placed a tablet on the table. On the screen, the video of Richard humiliating Daniel had already begun spreading across the business world. Richard's confident smile slowly disappeared. He suddenly realized Daniel Parker hadn't just walked away. The next morning, Daniel Parker woke before sunrise. For the first time in 11 years, there was no office to rush to. No endless emails. No impossible deadlines. No fear of another humiliating meeting. Yet, instead of feeling relieved, he felt the weight of uncertainty. He prepared breakfast for Lily as usual, making pancakes shaped like little hearts, her favorite. As they sat together, Lily looked at him with a smile. "Daddy, are you nervous about today?" Daniel chuckled. "A little." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Remember what you always tell me?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What do I always tell you?" "When one door closes, another one opens." Daniel smiled. I guess today we'll find out if that's true. After dropping Lily off at school, Daniel drove to the downtown restaurant where Sarah Collins had arranged to meet him. It wasn't an ordinary cafe. It was one of the city's most exclusive business restaurants, where CEOs and investors often held private meetings. As Daniel walked inside, he noticed Sarah standing beside a table with 3 other executives. She greeted him warmly. Daniel, thank you for coming. He shook everyone's hand politely. One of the executives spoke first. My name is Robert Hayes, chairman of Nova Tech Industries. Daniel was surprised. The chairman? Robert smiled. We don't usually attend interviews. But this isn't an interview. It's an opportunity. Coffee was served, but no one touched it. Robert slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were several newspaper articles, industry reports, and performance charts. Every page highlighted Daniel's achievements over the past decade, projects that increased company profits, systems that saved millions of dollars, innovations credited to senior executives that Daniel had actually created. We've spent months investigating your work, Robert said, and one conclusion became very clear. You weren't Harrison Global's employee. You were its foundation. Daniel sat speechless. For years, he had quietly worked behind the scenes. He never imagined anyone had noticed. Sarah leaned forward. Yesterday's video confirms something even more important. You don't just have talent. You have character. Robert opened another folder. Inside was a formal employment contract. The salary printed on the first page made Daniel blink twice. It was nearly 3 times what he had earned before. But then Robert said something even more surprising. We're not offering you a management position. Daniel looked up. We're offering you the role of Chief Operating Officer. Daniel almost laughed. There must be some mistake. Robert shook his head. No mistake. We don't hire titles. We hire leaders. Before Daniel could answer, his phone vibrated. It was Michael, his former coworker. Daniel stepped outside to answer. Michael, is everything okay? You need to turn on the news. Daniel frowned. What happened? The board called an emergency meeting this morning. They've suspended Richard Harrison as CEO pending an internal investigation. Daniel stood frozen. What? The investors are furious. The video went viral overnight. Major clients are demanding explanations. And half the office is talking about resigning. Daniel looked up at the city skyline. Everything was changing faster than he could process. Back inside the restaurant, Sarah noticed the expression on his face. Bad news? Daniel smiled faintly. Actually, I think it's good news. Sarah nodded. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always leaves footprints. Just then, another executive entered the room carrying a tablet. Sorry to interrupt, but I think Daniel should see this. On the screen was a live business news broadcast. The reporter stood outside Harrison Global headquarters. Sources confirm that the company's stock has dropped sharply following yesterday's viral workplace confrontation. Employees were leaving the building carrying boxes. Some reporters interviewed former workers. One woman said, Daniel Parker was the only manager who ever treated us with respect. Another employee added, the company didn't lose an employee. It lost its heart. Daniel quietly turned the screen off. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't enjoy seeing his former coworkers suffer. He simply hoped the company would learn from its mistakes. Robert noticed Daniel's reaction. Most people would celebrate. Daniel shook his head. Good people don't enjoy watching others fall. They simply refuse to fall with them. A smile spread across the faces of everyone at the table. At that moment, they knew they had made the right decision. Robert extended his hand. So, will you join Nova Tech? Daniel looked at the contract one final time. Then he smiled. I accept. Everyone stood and applauded, but none of them realized. Across town, Richard Harrison had just